Guys, welcome to another episode of Cuda Education. Today, I simply want to highlight something that is rather important, and I didn't fully realize the importance of it in the computer graphics sphere, and even specifically the Vulkan sphere. All right, so basically, I didn't realize that. Um, these shader languages that we play around with. So even if we go down to ray tracing basic and we go into the shaders, GLSL, right? We go into RayGen, we go into the mist shader, we go into the closest hit shader. This is just the ray trace triangle. I didn't realize how important the actual shading language is in the bigger scheme of things. So the mental model that I have, and which I think is you know what is sufficient for the time being, is that Vulkan is sort of like the baseline. Vulkan is it does the boilerplate stuff, it does the heavy lifting behind the scenes, the unfun stuff, the things that you just have to deal with just for the nature of being on a computer and all of that, right? Memory management, blah, 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 right? But really, for the cool stuff, for the stuff that we see, for even, just the ability to manipulate things and add features and do different things in sort of computer graphics or cutting edge stuff, the innovative stuff. It really relies on these shader languages. So, for example, you notice here that for its one application that we have, right, ray tracing basic, it's one source file, one.cpp, one sort of script that runs on the CPU and issue stuff, does stuff with the GPU. But like all of these shader language stuff, you notice that even for just simple basic thing, we have GLSL, language, shader language, we have HLSL language, and we have slang language, right? So just for this one example, we we have a variety of ways in which we could do processing. Now, I'll go out on a limb and say a lot of the shader language stuff is actually being done on the GPU, right? That's sort of how I look at it. Like a lot of the shader language stuff and like these files and stuff, it's actually running it on the GPU, right? So there are different variety of reasons. GLSL is I think it's the Kronos group, the people that are responsible for Vulkan and stuff. OpenGL, that's their proprietary language. You have HLSL, which I believe is I don't even know at this point, but I think that's Microsoft, right? That's a Microsoft language, and then you have slang, which is another language. Now, reason one might use one over the other is for portability reasons, for maybe high performance computing reasons, for research, academia. There's all forms and varieties of why someone would use one language over the other. Some are better compatible with like NVIDIA compilation stuff, things like that. Right, some for modularity. Some maybe it's better for like mobile devices. Some, I don't know, supercomputers, mainframe. I don't know where quantum computing comes into all of this, but the point that I want to make is that I didn't realize that the heart of what makes things cool and what is innovative and stuff is really in these shader languages. And it kind of makes sense because you can't really it's not like you can be updating the core Vulkan spec, rapidly. You don't want to be messing with the platform, because the platform is the core of everything. It's what glues everything together, and you want to be very methodical and strategic about how you go about updating the platform, right? Now, as far as the shader languages, plug and play, right? You could put in stuff, you could take out stuff, you could experiment with things for a while, not experiment with things, whatever. But because it's just an accessory, it's an attachment. It's a powerful attachment. It's an important attachment. But you have a little bit freer hand in sort of your ability to innovate and do stuff. So once you see Microsoft investing time and energy into it, obviously, the Kronos group, which is the OpenGL Vulkan people, investing time in it, and then you have like Rust GPU and a whole bunch of other language shader languages. You really realize the importance of this stuff. Now, there's a third thing. So all of these languages here, remember, they all boil down to, and why it works with Vulkan is that they all boil down to the SPIR-V format. So SPIR-V. Now that SPIR-V format or SPIR-V language is another Kronos group, Vulkan the Vulkan people, the OpenGL people. That's another invention. And the reason for that invention is because all of these shading languages have to basically be compiled down or be boiled down to SPIR-V format. Okay? So you could do whatever you want in your, proprietary language, all that good stuff. But at some point, you have to basically be able to boil all that you're doing down to the SPIR-V format. And this is another invention created by the Kronos group because they wanted consistency in how things are communicated, things are understood, things are processed across all the vendors. So what was happening in the olden days is that, a slight difference in how something is interpreted or how something is viewed and how it's processed, a slight difference between an AMD GPU and an NVIDIA GPU, a slight difference in how things are processed could lead to, in your simulation or in your video game or whatever, you get crashes, right? And you're making progress, you're at the last stage and you're about to beat the boss, and then your game crashes or something like that, right? And this would happen because, every shop, every vendor, whether it's Intel, AMD, NVIDIA, would have their own way of interpreting all of these shader language commands, right? So because you have different ways of interpreting the shader language commands, you wouldn't have consistency, which means, you'd have to download a patch so that your game runs, and it all depends on your setup. And, if you have two computers, you might have to download two different patches because, one computer has one setup and the other computer has another setup. So in order, Kronos Group's attempt to sort of stabilize the marketplace and make sure that whatever happens here in the shader world actually is interpreted correctly when you come to actually running your computer graphics application, that's where SPIR-V comes in, right? So that's That's that. We could go into the intersection and the shaders. So notice for this application, we have four four shaders. We only have the GLSL and the slang language for this particular shader. So you could either do GLSL or you could do slang. You know, for you know, for some of them it's one or the other. But yeah, I just didn't realize how important it's actually so important that the Vulkan conference, at the Vulkan conference, they said that they are going to dedicate a portion of the conference to the shader language folks. So they're literally like bringing in people who are the authors or responsible for these shader languages, and you know, they're going to have them speak at the conference. It's that important. Now, the Vulkan conference is the Vulkan conference. It's for Vulkan, but the fact that you're going to dedicate time to the shader language people underscores just how important this is to them. Yeah, so that's my lesson for today, guys. Quick talk. Again, guys, if you want to follow along, tutorial number 1 and tutorial number 13. So tutorial number 1 is installing the Vulkan API. Tutorial number 13 is installing all of these examples. If you want to run the ray tracing stuff, you have to get you have to make sure you have a Vulkan-capable GPU on your system. That's just to run Vulkan, period. But if you want the ray tracing stuff on a Windows machine, you also need to have a ray tracing capable GPU. For NVIDIA, that's RTX and above. For the other vendors, I don't know. But it has to be ray tracing capable. All right, so yeah, that's it, guys. But we could see that the shading language and the shader stuff is not something to be to gloss over. And I might have been guilty of that myself, guilty as charged. But yeah, we're learning. For the time being, I mean, I've only really been messing around with the GLSL stuff. I really don't know anything about the others, and I'm kind of trying to just keep the number of permutations and complexity to a minimum. So I'm just going to run with that for now, unless there's a real case for me to start diving into some other shader language, right? But Vulkan is the priority, right? Vulkan is the priority. We're going to do the Vulkan and the GLSL link. I'm going to assume that since both Vulkan and GLSL is created by the Kronos group, that it should be a little easier and straightforward and less painful to sort of work with, because it's vertically integrated, right? So anyway, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day.